This agent reported a confrontation occurring between Soviet military units and the UFO occupants. A beam of light directed against a Soviet military jeep destroyed the jeep, completely vaporizing the vehicle. The creatures were transported to 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, a military barracks, and detained. The creature's craft was secured by Soviet military personnel. The craft was described as being 15.5 meters in diameter, 5 meters high. It sounds to me like this craft is a lot bigger than the other two crafts they had. On January 22nd, 1985, U.S. intelligence learned of an incident involving the Soviet military and a UFO near an intercontinental ballistic missile site, or abbreviated ICBM site, near the town of 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗧 in the eastern part of the Soviet Union. U.S. intelligence had a deep cover asset or agent working for the Soviet military in the area. Now, an asset is somebody that we send in to do the work for us, or we call them within the intelligence community the agents. The agent isn't the case officer that sends them in. The agent is somebody, probably normally a citizen of that particular country, who's doing the work undercover. According to this agent, a UFO landed near an ICBM site, number 62, in the early morning hours of January 12, 1985. Now, notice those two dates. January 22nd is when we learned about it, but the incident happened January 12th, a 10-day span. Well, it takes some time for agents operating deep inside a country to report back to their case officer. And this is a case of that. This agent reported a confrontation occurring between Soviet military units and the UFO occupants. The Soviet soldiers shot one of the occupants of the UFO after the occupant approached the soldier. After the shooting, several other occupants of the craft retrieved the injured occupant and returned to the craft. A beam of light directed against a Soviet military jeep destroyed the jeep, completely vaporizing the vehicle. The Soviet commander in the area ordered his troops to destroy the UFO. Several rounds from a 12.7 millimeter gun was directed at the craft. Now here we have a war or a battle occurring on Earth inside a communist country between a military force, earthbound military force, and an alien force. Now you can just imagine what information was being relayed from the scene through systems, through teletype systems or military communication systems, all the way to the Kremlin in Moscow. You know, fortunately, we were able to tap into some of those communications. We had the National Security Agency with spy satellites flying around the Soviet Union, especially in this area. And those satellites didn't just pick up what was on the ground as a photographic intelligence. They were also picking up signal, or SIGINT as we call it, signal intelligence, or ELINT, electronic intelligence. One of the 12.7 millimeter rounds struck the bottom of the craft. The craft glowed a bluish green color. At the time, 4 occupants of the craft exited and were taken into custody by Soviet military troops. The occupants were described as 1 meter in height, weigh about 25 kilograms, no hair, 4 fingers, no thumbs, narrow feet, wearing heavy boots. The occupants were wearing tight-fitting silvery suits. No weapons were observed on the occupants, which the Soviet military named 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪္🐁 or creatures in English. That's the word for creatures in English in Russian. Now, I've done enough of these presentations, and I'm sure my viewers out there have listened to the description of ETs in the past. This particular description of ETs sounds just like the Greys, exactly like the Greys, with exception of the boots. But this might be just the interpretation of what these ETs are wearing by the Soviet military. The creatures were transported to 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, a military barracks near this location, and detained. Once at the barracks, Soviet doctors examined the 4 creatures, including the injured one. The doctors revealed the creature's eyes very oversized compared to the size of their head. The head was pear-shaped, no ears were observed on the creatures. The mouth consisted of just a small slit. 2 small openings were above the mouth and was assumed to be the nostrils. An attempt was made by Soviet intelligence personnel to communicate with the creatures. A number of different languages were used to try to communicate with them: Russian, English, French, German, and even Chinese. However, the creatures could not understand any of these languages. Sign language and other attempts to communicate failed. The occupants sat without making a sound. Now, you can imagine what these creatures were feeling. Maybe we can't because we don't know how they think. But we as humans would be pretty scared. We're in a hostile environment. They're being interrogated by strange-looking creatures themselves. We, humans, who were wearing guns or weapons. The creature's craft was secured by Soviet military personnel. The craft was described as being 15.5 meters in diameter, 5 meters high. The craft was dark gray colored with no noticeable engines. And it did not have any markings at all, no markings whatsoever on the craft. It did have lights that would come on and off at various locations on the craft, but there wasn't any other markings. U.S. intelligence analyzed the report given by this agent. The agent was a reliable source U.S. intelligence had used for 22 years. So this spy, as I can call him, had been working for United States intelligence for 22 years. So he was a reliable asset to us. We knew the agent was there. He was part of the Soviet military team. Although he wasn't actually at the scene, he was in a supervisory position and he was located some distance away from this. But he was receiving all the communications that was occurring between the ground forces and the command post. The information provided by the agent is somewhat unbelievable based on the subject matter. However, U.S. intelligence feels the information warrants further investigation. Now remember, I talked about collecting ELINT, SIGINT, and voice intercepts before. That information wasn't available to the agents, our assets on the ground at the time, or our team of case officers. That information came later. Ironically, U.S. intelligence did obtain 22 of the 100 photographs taken at the scene. Now, we also were able to direct additional assets into this operation. Not necessarily assets to the scene, but assets within the Soviet Union who could verify some of the information through other sources. In 2006, 𝗪𝗘𝗕𝗦𝗪𝗧𝗘 came forward to relay additional information on the incident. He was a KGB agent that investigated this incident at the scene. Now, years later, we have a KGB agent coming forth and saying, I was there, let me tell you about what happened. So Mikhail told us what happened. According to Mikhail, he was on duty in the area of this event. And this is his story. On the early morning hours of 11 January 1985, a UFO landed at 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗧, a small village west of 𝗪𝗘𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘. The Soviet police from 𝗪𝗘𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘 was dispatched to the scene. The UFO was on the ground for 1 hour. The UFO took off after the police arrived. The UFO flew southwest to the missile site where the confrontation occurred. Now we see that a day before the original incident happened at 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗘, this particular, we think, and they think, the KGB thinks it was the same craft, landed some distance away from 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗘 in a small village, Soviet village. The two creatures, including the injured one, were taken to a military barracks at Irkutsk, not Sashalakova. So now there's some different information that we're receiving from the former KGB agent, differing of what information was given to our asset, or information that our asset gave to us. That's common. There's so much occurring in a particular area at that time. If you have two assets working independently of each other, they may give you different information. The creatures did communicate with one of the young Soviet soldiers through hand signals. The creatures escaped from the barracks where they were being detained, even though they were being guarded by the elite KGB border troops. Now, within the Soviet Union back in those days, the KGB controlled the border, and they had elite troops. I guess would be similar to our Rangers or our Delta Force Commandos, or even similar to the GSG-9 West Germany Border Patrol. The creatures escaped. Now remember this, they were guarded, they were in a secure facility, and somehow they disappeared. If you put all this together, you realize that a real incident happened inside the Soviet Union. Maybe this was the Roswell. Actually, this would have been more than just a Roswell incident. This is an actual battle that occurred on the ground inside the Soviet Union between the Soviet military and extraterrestrials. What happened to these extraterrestrials? How did they escape? Or did they just disappear? Did they have the ability to do that? And why hadn't they disappeared prior to this? All these questions we can think about and theorize, but we don't know the answer to. They're gone. But what the Soviets did have, and now the Russians have, is the craft. The craft didn't disappear. The craft is still in hands of the Russian government, probably at 𝗪𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘 or some other place being analyzed, and maybe even reverse engineering. I mean, we did this in the past at Area 51. I'm sure the Russians are doing it today, and they'd probably done it in the past. And this is probably not the only craft the Russians obtained. We knew before they had two crafts at 𝗪𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘 back in the 80s that they were collected before that. Now, in 1985, they have another craft. It sounds to me like this craft is a lot bigger than the other two crafts they had. So now they have at least three crafts. Anyway, that concludes my presentation regarding the incident at 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗘. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, I'm Richard Doty.
If you liked this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.